The views, opinions, or advice offered by this show's host do not necessarily reflect those of News Talk 780 KOH or its parent company, Cumulus Media. This is Bosma on Business with award-winning entrepreneur Mike Bosma, sponsored by Keystone CPAs. We're getting Northern Nevada back to business.
Good morning, business owners. Mike Bosma from your KOH studio. Each and every Saturday, we call it Bosma on Business. Welcome, you Saturday morning crew. One of the things that I just love about doing the show now, going on our 13th year, is that each and every Saturday we just get to do a little bit of business together and learn about the ins and outs, the nuances of how business happens each and every day. Of course, we call it 60 minutes of action-packed business adventure. So now, if you've been a long-term listener of the show, which we appreciate, you know that we have people from across the country, sometimes across the world, that come and share their entrepreneurial journeys. Today, no different. On the phone, Dr. Andrew Feltz from 360 Care, and really just a swell guy. Andy, welcome to Bosma on Business.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate you having me on, and appreciate the compliment.
My pleasure.
Being called swell.
Right. So,
I'm coming to you from the Eastern time zone here in Columbus, Ohio, where thankfully it's spring.
All right. Spring has sprung. Hallelujah. Of course, Here in the great state of Nevada. If you don't like the weather in northern Nevada this time of year, just wait 15 minutes. One day it could be sunny, one day it could be raining, then it could be snowing, and then you'd be having a hot spell, all within the context of a day in the high desert. So, it's just a little different.
High desert living, right?
That's
a little different, yeah.
That's it. So, Andy, the way we get this thing started, hey, if I ran into, at an entrepreneur's event or just even at the bar or maybe in the elevator, we call it the elevator pitch, and, you're a business owner? Tell me about your business. What would you say?
Sure. I would say that I am an optometric entrepreneur, and rather than going the traditional route of having a practice hanging a shingle, I do mobile healthcare, and we currently do optometry, podiatry, dental, and audiology services to nursing home residents in 16 states on the eastern half of the U.S., and deliver those services on site to the residents of those skilled nursing homes.
So, I've had plenty of clients and guests on this show over the years that, they would, kind of like a subcontractor, right? Where it's like, oh, what do you do? I'm a concrete subcontractor. I'm an electrician. I'm a plumber. But you've taken it all on the road, and you're kind of like the general contractor of medical care. So you got them all covered.
Yeah, we look at ourselves as a one-stop shop for nursing homes to cover their ancillary care needs. They're going to have their medical director, their primary care doctor, but all the other care that could be delivered to them on site, we want to provide that and have that one phone call for the customer. So we have a care coordinator that, if resident Mrs. Jones needs a denture work and resident Mr. Smith needs eyeglasses work, they can call the same number, and we're going to send out teams to deal with those issues.
So, and of course, I'm fascinated, Andy. Like, how did you come up with this business model?
So I kind of stumbled into it. I did my residency at the VA hospital in Cleveland, which was amazing. But part of our rotation was we would go and cover the veterans nursing home and kind of like the idea of not being tied down to an office. So there's some improvising with the work. You don't have that kind of same clinical room every day. You kind of have to set up, where you can and see people, at different angles and different positions and all that kind of stuff really appealed to me. But got out into that traditional workforce and really didn't like it. So I said, how can I maybe do something on the side just to supplement? So a buddy of mine, we bought a practice in Marion, Ohio, which is kind of a smaller country town, thinking we could work together. This would be fun, rather than working for somebody else. Traditional thing. Let's buy a practice and run it. Well, we found out it was a one doctor practice for a reason. There was really only room for one doctor. So, him and I were staring at each other a lot when only one of us had a patient. And we thought, what could we do to supplement our income? And that would be fun. And I said, hey, I used to love doing nursing homes. Let's do that. And so we just started doing that on the side for something, else to keep us busy. And I personally just fell in love with the work more the more I did it.
Okay.
And the other thing I noticed with it is, as a healthcare provider, it's hard to get leverage. the really difficult piece that's important for business, I think, is to get leverage, because as you bring other doctors into your practice, to get margin on their work becomes more difficult as they get experience and as they get, because why, they could just break off and
do their own, right? They're like, why should I give Andy, any of the profits? I will just go out, I'll take all the patients and do this myself. Right?
And people come to your practice for you.
Right.
So, they're not coming for a quote unquote system. They're coming for that personalized approach, unless you work at a lens crafters or something like that. Right. Well, if you're an optometrist or you're at Aspen Dental, those companies have decided we've got a system we're going to deliver to the market for the people that don't really care if it's Dr. Smith or Dr. Jones on any given day. Or if you're in a private practice as a physician, people are coming for you, your personality, your care, your reputation, and that kind of stuff. So it's hard to get leverage.
Right.
That's where I felt like this would be different, because the nursing home doesn't care. They want a system.
Mm-hmm. They want to be on somebody that shows up whenever you call, right? And that's the problem with individualized, that personal care. Yeah, it's great until that service provider is full, and then then they're out of luck, because they're like, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you right now, I'm full. And so it's funny. I have a concierge doctor, and I had a friend who was really interested in that. I referred him over, and they said, oh, sorry, they said they're full. I'm like, wow, okay, well, right, because they can't lever it. As soon as their schedule's full, they have their plate that is overflowing, and they're like, oh, I'm either going to have to sacrifice care or stop taking patients. So, but what you found is this kind of mobile care to nursing homes that you can have now. How do you backfill the professional part of it? That's always the sticky wicket, right? So it's like, once you're full, how do you hire other people to provide this care?
So there is as you scale, right? So early on, it was me working my tail off, and we would open a new market. So first we started in Central Ohio, and it was just us, and that was fine. And then once I got this vision that we could scale this thing and grow it, we kind of took a wagon wheel approach. So we basically hired a doctor first into the practice so that we could be freed up from doing being tethered to it, and then we'd be free to grow the business. And we would do a wagon wheel approach where the next market would be something we could drive to 2 or 3 hours away. And basically, I would just go on, Monday, open up the market, work it, and then as we grew the business, then I would, extract myself from it, and we would hire in a provider, in that market. Well, then we'd do it over again to the next wagon, the next spoke of the wheel, so to speak. And now we've gotten to the point where we have a recruiting team because we're so big.
Right.
We have over 600 providers out there, so it is still a challenge. It's probably actually more of a challenge now since COVID than it was, when we were really aggressively growing the business. Okay. Yeah, COVID really affected the labor force in the medical field, because if you were a 65-year-old doctor, you'd be like, I want to keep working for a while. This is fun. I could do 2 or 3 days a week, which is perfect for us, right? We can hire part-time providers. Well, a lot of them just said, forget it. I don't want to do this anymore because of the increased, infection control, getting tested all the time. It just became burdensome during the peak of COVID to be a healthcare provider. And then you've got some of the middle-aged ones who are like, you know what? COVID kind of reset my expectations of what my lifestyle should be like, and I don't want to work 60 hours a week. I only want to work 40.
Right.
So the pool of, hours to grab in the market of healthcare has really been depleted because of COVID.
Right. Well, then is that starting to back off any now, or people they kind of like the 40-hour work week? Like, no, this is better.
Yes, it's getting better, especially as inflation's ticked up.
Right. Starts eroding some of that retirement, right? Like, what the heck are we doing?
Yeah, they're looking at their expenses, and they're like, well, I guess maybe I should go back and work another day, or instead of just working 3 or 4 days a week, I'm going to pick up that 4th or 5th day. Right. Or we have quite a few in the last 2 years, docs who had sold their practice a few years ago and said, I've been retired for 2 years, kind of tired of that lifestyle, and I'd like to work 1 or 2 days. And we kind of fill that in nicely for them because our days aren't long.
Right.
You generally get to the facility, in the morning, work till 2 or 3 o'clock, and you're out. So, the semi-retired, applicant pool really likes that lifestyle.
Okay. No, it makes sense. Dr. Andy Feltz from 360 Care talking about his mobile care business to nursing home, rather, and just kind of growing to 600 professionals, quite an accomplishment. I think, I think the last numbers I was looking at out of the Small Business Administration, Andy, is that 4% of all businesses make it to $1 million in revenue, and only 0.4% make it to over 10 million. So, it's you're definitely part of the 0.1% for what you've been able to pull off. Now, just when you talk about that type of care, though, the thing that really strikes me is the capital required to grow that, because typically, if you're in nursing homes, you're either fee for service or a lot of times Medicare. Yeah, and which means you got to, and your doctors typically don't want to wait 2 months to get paid. How do you work out cash flow in an organization of that size?
Yeah, it got difficult for a while. So I think, to your opening point there about, as business is growing, and I'm sure you've talked about this with other folks, or it's maybe a common thing that people talk about, but there's that dark, deep chasm you have to go through. So when we first started doing this, we were feeling pretty good about ourselves as young doctors. We were making a nice living because even though we're working at the lower end of the food chain with Medicare and Medicaid, we could get those economies of scale and low overhead in our work. We made a nice little income until we decided to grow it.
Right.
And then we were broke.
Yep.
Because you have to go through that dark chasm.
Right.
So we ended up bringing on some partners, and that had been successful in other businesses, because we were just a couple dumb-eye doctors. We didn't know how to really scale business, or how to add these other services. So we brought in another partner or two that had some finance background and could get some banking relationships for us during that dark chasm. And part of my discussion with my partner at the time was I'd rather have 25% of a ginormous pie than 50% of this little
right.
podunk country practice. And we took a leap of faith in that, and it definitely worked out. Now that we've got this, and then when you're in that chasm, you've got this, I used to call it the monster needs to eat every 2 weeks, right? As you're
right,
growing,
payroll.
as you're growing this business, the monster eats regardless of whether you worked hard that month or not, or
right.
2 weeks or not. So yeah, finding capital resources that you can leverage,
Sure.
working with other people's money,
Yep.
is important, and building a track record of financial
success. Right. So Andy, on the phone, Dr. Andy Feltz from 360 Care, when we come back, he's going to talk about that valley of despair that Rockefeller Habits, Vern Harnish author, would talk about. And we come back. It's called Bosma on Business, News Talk 780 KOH.
Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan shares real stories from real people from all walks of life on The Sean Ryan Show. Comedian John Christ.
How long have you been in Nashville? Let's see, 2018 is when I moved here. I lived in an apartment. I didn't know anything about it. I lived in L.A.
You were living in L.A.? How was that?
Yeah. Well, let's see, good for my career. Send me to rehab, though. So, that's pretty much the sum of it.
The Sean Ryan Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.
Without the ones like you, who work tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop. Hospitals, factories, schools, and power plants, they all depend on you. No matter the weather, emergency, or time of day, you're the ones who get it done. At Grainger, we're here for you with professional-grade industrial supplies. Count on real-time product availability and fast delivery. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma, on the phone. Dr. Andy Feltz from 360 Care talking about the monster, the payroll monster that eats twice a month, every other week, and whether or not you bill or not, whether or not you get paid. Those employees have an expectation that check hits their bank, 15th and the 30th every month. And so as you're scaling a business, as Andy said in the last segment, it takes 30 to 60 to sometimes 90 days when you're dealing with the government, Medicaid, Medicare, sometimes they just decide they're not paying. for a minute, and then you're like, what do I do?
Right.
Right. And so then you're like, oh, but the monster, the payroll monster, he wants to be fed. He must be fed. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to have billings after that. So it just, and I think that to Andy's point on the last segment really speaks to the need to have some financial acumen around the table. And he was able to get some finance partners to help grow his business now to 600 doctors. But and that's where I think about if you're out there and you're wondering how to grow and scale. I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization. Or president, actually. And, I'd say there's a program they have. It's called the Accelerator Program for EO. And really, it's designed for businesses with $250,000 of revenue to $1 million. And even if you're over that, if you've never been through it, it really is all based on Vern Harnish's book, Rockefeller Habits, called Scaling Up. And it's all about, all the infrastructure, all the things you need to be able to effectively grow and scale a business. It's, as I mentioned on the last break, or before the last break, it's very rare. 4% of all businesses get to $1 million in revenue, 0.4 over 10. And it's a different business. And what got you there ain't going to get you where you want to go if you're trying to grow and scale this thing. And as Andy was sharing his story about that valley of despair. So basically you get to this peak of your business in whatever size you are. And oftentimes for service-based businesses, you'll get to somewhere between 7 employees and 12. And that's basically all a business owner can manage and have their fingers on, right? And I remember at Keystone CPAs, that's exactly where we were a couple of years ago. And we said, hey, we have this idea. We think this unique way, this unique approach of kind of doing that one-stop shop. Andy, to your point, right? You got the one-stop medical shop. We have the one-stop accounting shop, business broker, financial advisory, CPA, outsourced accounting, all under one roof. And it's like, hey, if people are trying to figure all this stuff out, they need all of this stuff, and we can plug into them. But it takes a minute, because I think this last year we went from 15 folks to 32 folks in 2023. It takes a bit. The cash flow takes a hit. So, that's okay. We're very, very, very fortunate. But I'm curious, Andy, when you went out and started talking to partners, air quotes partners, I've seen that blow up too, more times than not, actually. So how did you find your partners to help you grow and scale this thing? Yeah,
so I got lucky. My wife's best friend was getting married a little late in life compared to, our peers. And her fiance just asked me, what do I do? And I kind of told him what I do, and I told him what I wanted to do. And the next day he called me and said, hey, are you serious about what you want to do with that business? I said, yeah, I am. He goes, well, okay, here's my background. Here's what I've done. Let's meet. And he had been successful in staffing and franchising.
Okay.
And had sold that business back to corporate. And he said, what you've come up with, this idea, I think it could work. I'm excited about it. And this is what I want to do. I want to help you grow this thing. And so, we met, had some, history and trust there from a relationship standpoint. And so his ability to know on the scaling, the wagon wheel concept, and, finance, and take our idea, and help us run with it really was very beneficial. And very grateful that relationship worked out. But I know that there was risk there, right?
Right.
It's sort of like when you get married. You think you know who you're getting married to, but you don't know all the time. There's inherent risk in any relationship, right?
Well, that's just it, right? Because you probably have a pretty good idea who you're getting married to, and that's the dressed up, gussied up, right, best version of your mate. And then all of a sudden you get married. You don't have to do that anymore because you're married. then you find the nucleus of that atom. You're like, oh, well, maybe that's different. That's a different iteration of what was presented.
Yeah, and part of that is like my wife didn't give me a few $100,000 of seed money.
Right.
When we got married. So obviously, if this partner is going to put skin in the game, that does help you mitigate your risk or your due diligence, I guess.
Well,
they're willing to help.
Yeah, if they're going to stroke a check,
money into
always helps, right? But it's interesting, right? Because we're talking about growing and scaling a business through, acquiring capital, whether that's, the bank, the least expensive form of capital, but the banks get to a certain pain point of like, no, you need to put more capital in. Like, well, I'm putting everything I'm making in. What else can I put in? And when you're out earning that, when you're out growing that, then you're like, you need real risk capital. So those capital partners are great people. They are difficult to find. So Andy, good on you. Sometimes better lucky than good. Take the win. But that's where a lot of times what we do is we help have conversations with people to make sure that we're aligned from a philosophy perspective and how we're going to run this business, which depending on what type of entrepreneur you are, some people more go by the seat of their pants, let's put it that way, kind of spitball it along the way. Other people are a little bit more pragmatic. I remember I opened up an insurance business with a couple of friends, probably 15 years ago now, and we thought we had a guy, we had all this business, we had the financial advisor, the attorney, the CPA. We're just going to refer all our clients into it. It's going to be a property and casualty business. We're going to make all the money. And of course, I, as the accountant in the room, says, well, we need to do a business plan and do projections. And, and then, I had, at that time, my late great friend, his name is Jamie Kalicki, unfortunately died in early death, October 2022, but he was my best friend, and Jamie, but and Annie, I can imagine Jamie saying this, boss. That's why you're an accountant, right? Because you're afraid of your own shadow, right? Sometimes you just gotta take a risk. And so I said, okay, I will put $15,000 at risk in this venture, and then when it runs out, we're going to reevaluate. So he looked at me with disdain, and then when we burned through that, so about three of us put in $15,000. When we burned through the $45,000, it took about 6 months, and we had really no revenue to show for it. And I says, "Are we done yet? Should we do a business plan?" It was the last time Jamie gave me grief about a business plan, because it was like sometimes it does take a certain amount of rigor to know, like, how much is it, how long is it going to take? What are the assumptions? And then you can right size that along the way. So you found a capital partner. Sounds like you threw a couple $100,000 in. How did you decide how much say he got in the business? I guess that's always the sticky wicket, I find.
Yeah. So we did evaluation based on, what we were currently doing, and put a premium on that based on, the fact that it was, quote unquote, our idea or our creation. Mm-hmm. And he wrote us each a check for, a third of the business. Okay.
Right. So
there's other ways to do that.
Yep.
We could have said come in for less,
mm-hmm.
But I pushed for it because I knew that we could do a lot of times, with doctors, they get bogged down in the middle.
Right.
And I know I was good on the front end on the vision. And I was really good on the back end on the technical part. And the middle part, the management, finance, accounting, HR, I had really not a lot of experience in that at any kind of size. And he did. So it felt like a good marriage from that standpoint. Mm-hmm. And just had to trust, trust that we were doing it that way. Now, right. I know as I've got more sophisticated and more exposure, there's other ways to structure those deals. And that's why people have professionals like you. Right. Involved in their situations, and I think that having a professional guide us through that would have been nice. Right. We got lucky and it worked out.
Okay,
but I would definitely say anybody that's looking at something like that, to bring in professional advice is always important, whether that's legal or accounting.
Dr. Andy Feltz from 360 Care, talking about bringing on a business partner, how that all baked out. When we come back, really do a little bit deeper dive into that and talk about how what that thing can grow to, what you maybe can sell it for. When we come back, we call it Bosma on Business, News Talk 780 KOH.
When you have sports mixed with your pop culture, along with humor and celebrity interviews, your earbuds are enjoying The Rich Eisen Show.
Kevin Millar, we're all paying rent in Ohtani's world, right?
And the Dodgers world. Game is healthy, game is good. And, I get asked a lot, is that good for baseball? Yeah, it's good for baseball. This is definitely the team to beat, because that should be your next correction, Richie, is this World Series a bust for the Dodgers and Dave Roberts?
Hell yeah.
Search for The Rich Eisen Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.
Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma. Bottom of the hour, I just give you a little tax tidbit. This one is, there's 3 things you need to know before April 15th. Extend, number 1. Number 2, extend. Number 3, extend your tax return. All right, extend. Why am I saying this? Well, number 1, know that if you extend your tax return on April 15th, that does an extension of time to file but not pay. So you still got to pay your tax. So it really is zero about how much you're going to pay in. You got to pay it in anyway. You got your first quarter estimated payment still due on 4/15. So get that paid in, especially now with interest rates. It's last however long, 10 years, the interest rates near zero. It didn't really matter. But now it's like, no, it'll hurt. So you want to make sure you're square on that. But the reason I mentioned extend is if there's some pending legislation right now that's sitting in the Senate that would probably, for any business owner listening to the show, going to change that tax return if you file it. Now, if you're doing business as a partnership, and you've already extended that partnership return, but maybe your personal return is due on 4/15, I'm going to say extend all of the above, because if you don't, and then you have to amend it, oftentimes you're not able to amend that partnership return because of these consolidated partnership audit rules that changed a couple of years ago. And so then you wouldn't be able to even fix it till next year. So all of a sudden, I got more deduction. Nope, get it next year. Okay. And that's the changing landscape. You want to stay on top of it. The other thing is, on an individual, if all of a sudden this legislation goes through and you change your S Corp or partnership return, and then you're able to you do not want to have to file an amended return with the Internal Revenue Service. You want to file this thing called a superseded return, which you can do all the way until the extended due date of your tax return, which is October 15th for individuals. And I'll tell you, I know that I am defending, and I think we just hit 40 audits, 40 IRS audits. Got approximately 24 CPA firms that are engaging Keystone CPAs to be the subject matter experts on these audits. And I will tell you, so I'm probably one of the most savvy on these on being audited in 2024 of pretty much any CPA or CPA firm, in the United States. So we're just doing a ton of this work. Very, very concentrated. But the reason I say that is, if you file an amended return, right, you say, I'm going to file it, and then all of a sudden it gets amended because this legislation goes through, and you have to file an amended return. A set of human IRS eyes are going to look at that tax return. Right? I just don't, there's no need for it, right? And it's better for you to file a superseded return, which is taken as the original. So that way it goes through automatically, no IRS agents leering at your tax return, wondering why, they have these funny deductions called children's expenses on your Schedule C. No, I'm just kidding. You can't deduct that. But, it's just a better way to go. This is a unique time in our nation's history. We've never been here before, so it's kind of a one-off. So that's why people listen to the show. They kind of get the cutting-edge advice that you need to be able to be smart about these things. Speaking of smart about these things, Dr. Andy Feltz from 360 Care on the phone, all the way from Ohio, Eastern time zone. Andy, we're talking about you bringing on your business partner, you got the company value, bought in for a third. And it's interesting as you mentioned that I had an opportunity. I have a listing for a paving company is through the business broker arm of Keystone, and I found like these people showed up, and they're like the perfect people to buy this business. Unfortunately, they didn't have two nickels to rub together because they've been working their entire career in the paving business, but they're great paving operators. Well, you called it the middle, Andy, which I 100% agree. Which is all the kind of the unsorted stuff, like accounting and human resources and information technology and payroll and that kind of stuff, that as you grow and scale, it gets beyond the owner and the owner's ability to have their fingers on all that. So I approached this couple, and I just said, hey, I'll tell you what, the down payment for this is $310,000 for this paving company. I'll stroke a check for it. They said, you would do the down payment? I go, I would, and I will. And like, well, how much of the business do you want for that? I go, I want 20%. Now, for the benefit of our listeners, the reason I picked 20%, it's not rocket science. That's how much, because they're going to get an SBA loan, and up to 20% is how much you have to have a personal guarantee on if the thing goes south. So, and because I do cash flow projections for these companies all day, every day, I knew that this company can get me my $310,000 back the first year just through cash flow. So I'm like, okay, well, and then if I control all the accounting and I control the bank accounts, I don't have to worry about somebody messing this up for us. They just have to get through a season, and I'm at zero. And I own 20% of a pretty cool company for zero. We got almost free. But then the real magic, I believe, is to say I can continue doing that, all that back office stuff, and then I have this amazing operator, and I showed them over 10 years, right? If for putting in zero, at the end of 10 years, their business is to them, between the cash that they got out of it and what the business's value is, $8 million. So it's like, and that's why I'm like, this is a great partnership, because like they don't have capital. Like now for me, I'm like going $300,000. My bite at that apple is I get my $300,000 back, and it's worth $2 million. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that have to come together, make all that magic happen. But that's entrepreneurship. That's why I love this stuff, because you can create a fortune if you're smart about how you, number one, run a business, to Andy, to your point, and then number two, how you scale a business, because that's really where the magic happens. Because, you can get it, and it's a great life. You go from, like for myself, growing up very, very poor, and then, kind of working in different types of jobs to get up to middle class, and then if this entrepreneurship thing, it can propel you to upper class and really have some wealth if you're smart about it. So I'm curious. So as you guys grew and decided to scale, you got your finance back office business partner there. How did you still need capital? So how did you get the capital to grow this thing?
So we basically, stopped getting paid.
Yep.
We knew that, to feed the beast and to grow it, we were going to have to make some capital purchases. So he didn't just stroke us a check; he also stroked the money into the business
Gotcha.
for growth.
Mm-hmm.
It was both of those things. And I would say that entrepreneurship's not a zero-sum game, right? So just in that paving business example, it's pretty evident that you can start with something and grow it to something that's so valuable that that little sacrifice you made at the beginning, or those sacrifices you made in the chasm, so to speak, seem inconsequential when you get to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly the case, for us. He's certainly happy that he did this arrangement with us, and we're certainly happy that we did the arrangement with him.
Right.
It was a win. It was a win-win for both of us. But getting that capital, that was, to buy equipment, and to grow was, difficult at first, and then got easier as our revenue stream,
right.
as our revenue stream grew. And at the same time, we were again fortunate because the insurance payers started really paying a lot faster as technology caught up. This would have been like 06, 07, 08. Electronic health records kicked in, electronic billing. So we were now getting, our payments within a couple weeks.
Okay. Right.
And being able to turn those around. So we were able to do that. And then when you show those cash flows, then getting a bank loan, we had a significant line of credit to open new markets. So we were in debt and we were getting paid less than we used to get paid, but we knew that the market was there. We had done a strong market analysis, and we knew we had, a good vision for it. And then we started to do some minor acquisitions, and those we would get creative with the companies that we were acquiring. They were generally, entrepreneur, single owner operations. We bought a dental practice and a podiatry practice, and we would do earn-outs and all kinds of creative ways to lower our upfront costs so that we could pay them, a premium based on what the business would continue to bring in.
Right. Right. So that's
how we added other services.
Right. It is fascinating because, when I'm representing both buyers and sellers on the business brokerage side, I always find out what their love language is. Right. So, and sometimes their love language is, I need to sell it for this number. And then I just solve for that. Sometimes I need to solve it. It's a cash flow thing. I need how much I need to get after tax, after fees. Whatever their perspective on it. I don't try and educate them differently. I just try and make my offer consistent with whatever they want. And so and I'll give you an example. So I have that paving company. Unfortunately, that couple that I was talking about, they decided to go on vacation for 2 weeks, and then somebody else. Actually, very savvy private equity firm came in, and they love this company, and they're going to grow this thing. So, but they knew what the owner needed, and so to your exact point. So they made sure that offer was exactly what the owner said he wanted, not a penny less. But then it was like they got terms on it, so it's paid over time. So it's basically paid for itself, right? So
it's not the price; it's the terms.
It's the terms. Yeah. It's the terms. Yep. And that's exactly right. And so that's where you're like, hey, whatever you need, how much do you need down? Okay, this is how we will work this out. Fine. Because, and that's where I'll tell you, you got a lot of transactions done because you're speaking somebody else's language. And like you approach these entrepreneurs, hey, are you sick and tired of doing this? Yeah, I just want to do fillings. If I can just do fillings for a living instead of all this other business, because that's the problem with small business. It takes so much energy to be the chief cook and bottle washer, staying up at night, doing billings, backfilling your medical records, whatever, where you're like, there's just not enough hours in the day and I'm not making anything. But if you're a larger organization, then you ever want, let me say it this way. So the Institute of Management Accountants every year would put out a study on how CPAs, how much they make. And so, not surprisingly, the largest CPA firms always paid the best compensation. And I was, as I explained to like all these dozens and dozens now of other CPA firms that were bolting onto Keystone, I said, "You ever wonder why that is?" And it's the same CPA, but they don't have a problem hiring people because they can pay because they have the economies of scale so that they can make more money with less overhead. Right? It's just efficiencies, operational efficiencies, period. And that's where it's like you just need to get to a certain size to get that next, plateau to, which is like for most people, you go from 1 million rev to 10, and that's another plateau for you. So when you get there. So, and that's where, Andy, I really appreciate you sharing your story. So when we come back, we're going to wrap that up, put a bow on it, tell us how that exit went. And then the number one thing, you heard it here and only here, it's Bosma on Business. News like 780 KOH. Welcome back to Bosma on Business. Your host, Mike Bosma. On the phone, Dr. Andy Feltz from 360 Care. The short segments, we're going to get to it. Andy, you did have a successful exit. So I'm curious when you decided that was and how that went.
We did several acquisitions to grow to the size we wanted, and then we finally ended up with what I'll call a merger, that kind of equals, but sort of vertical. And that was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I had a 5-year put clause in that. So we combined two businesses, stayed on as the chief clinical director, and after 5 years, I was able to, sell my portion, which I executed there a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And that was wonderful. There's a certain satisfaction, and I want to link this back a little bit to what you said previously with, there's an emotional part to that number. The terms aren't emotional, so that's where you can make some hay on either side of that. And certainly, I feel like I got the number I wanted, and I feel like the terms were fair, and I have no issues with how my exit went. And it is a relief. At some point, I know that if I had stayed longer, I could have gotten more money. But at some point you want to de-risk a little bit, and if you have all your eggs in one basket, sometimes it's smart to get out, so to speak.
Well, and that's I appreciate that, Andy, because I will tell you for the benefit of our listeners, I'm in a transaction right now that a wood manufacturing company. If I got too detailed, people figure it out. So everything's confidential, but wood manufacturing company. And it's interesting because what I was telling them is, because they're like, okay, we have our number, and they couldn't get to that number. And I just said, for what you're off, that delta that the buyer's just unwilling to get there, we found it in tax savings. I go, so, net, you're still the same. I know it's not your love language, but you wanted 30 and we're getting 27. Is it? But if I save you all the money, if I save you $3 million in tax, aren't you at 30? Right? And so we finally got that deal done. It's in contract. But the reason I mention is this. So entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs. So oftentimes the next deal, like for me, right, this paving company, when I was like, hey, I found a great operator. How about I'll throw in some capital, you run it, it's going to be rainbows and unicorns. It's not the end of your entrepreneurial journey. It's sometimes just the beginning. So Andy, leave our listeners with the number one thing. So if there was one thing that you wish you knew before you got into this business, what would it be?
I wish I'd known a little bit more savviness on the finance, and I could have definitely, and the contract side of it, I definitely could have said something about getting out halfway. Mm-hmm. We had a full put in our contract, and it would have been nice to have a little wiggle room to say, hey, I'd like to de-risk and sell half my stake and stay on and continue to grow the company that I love.
Right.
So I guess that would be the one thing that I would like to have written in there, and I didn't have that. I had a good put, It was an excellent put.
But it was an all or none.
I didn't have a half put. I didn't have a half put.
I got you. I understand. So,
yeah.
No, Andy, thank you so much. If as your entrepreneurial journey advances, if there's something newsworthy, please reach out. Love to have you back. Speaking of having your back, if you need some help to extend, 775-786-4900, Bosma at keystone.cpa. Now, next week's installment, we're going to be doing the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of some tax strategies that you just want to be smart about before you extend that tax return or file the tax return. I got the top 10 things you need to know to be smart about tax. Next week's installment of Bosma on Business. Till then, you business owners, keep that business engine humming. We call it Bosma on Business. News Talk 780. KOH.
When you have sports mixed with your pop culture, along with humor and celebrity interviews, your earbuds are enjoying The Rich Eisen Show.
Kevin Millar, we're all paying rent in Ohtani's world, right?
And the Dodgers world, game is healthy, game is good. And, I get asked a lot, is that good for baseball? Yeah, it's good for baseball. This is definitely the team to beat because that should be your next correction, Richie, is this World Series a bust for the Dodgers and Dave Roberts?
Hell yeah.
Search for The Rich Eisen Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.